And we are live. So it is Monday night in week 6. And so Wednesday we'll be segueing into the end run. And on Wednesday, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to see, I guess I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a poll and see who can make it more Wednesday or next Monday. And I'll do a presentation on critical thinking and rethinking who consumers are, what we've been told about wine history, which isn't really the truth, and then a discussion about why I think we ought to stop wine and food pairing. So there we go. So that's coming up. And then I've also got some things to share about my insights while I was out touring the bourbon country. But before I launch in, do you guys have any questions or clarifications or anything you need me to wrap up?
I'm good. No, I'm sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
Oh, I just said I'm good for right now.
Okay, great.
I was just gonna wanted a little bit more detail on our final project, if we could go over that again.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so let me go ahead and do the screen share because I had that on the agenda, as it is usually a question. Okay, so your final project needs to be a wine biz sim, and it could be any one of these, or maybe even different if you want to set up a call to talk to me. It could be the $25 red blend, but maybe going in and tweaking some numbers, and especially if you're a newbie, there might have been things that didn't make sense that for the next 2 weeks kind of spend a little bit more time with figuring out. And also, if you're a newbie and don't have a lot of wine background, use the Wine Biz Sim to look at various aspects of different procedures and stuff that you can further look up online and so on. So that's like minimum requirement number 1, is just continue on that Wine Biz Sim. If you did the blending, you can use your blending Wine Biz Sim as your submission, and we'll get to then the business plan and what to do with that. So that's number 2. And then the third option is make a wine, whether you try to make a couple million cases of 2 Buck Chuck, or if you want to make a couple barrels of a high-end, really expensive wine. So it's kind of up to you, and you can do either the basic Wine Biz Sim, the cost of goods, or you can do the blending, your choice. Okay, so that's submission. That's part 1 of the submission.
Okay.
And you have up to 4 weeks after the course to get it turned in. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Part 2 then is the business plan. Again, I'm not looking for a huge amount of details. However, there are people who are working in the class on a business. And so the detail is kind of up to you how much you want to put into it. If you are a master of wine, someday kind of a thing, or in the Master of Wine program or in Wine and Spirits Education Trust, use this exercise to think more deeply in general about wines as you're building out and filling in the blanks on the template, okay? So the full requirements to complete the course, the $25 red blend, and then another Wine Biz Sim or a continuation of that, plus the business plan.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep.
And again, I don't have a lot of requirements. There's not a lot of tests or quizzes. The next couple weeks are also, I'm in town, so anybody who wants to set up a call, the next couple weeks would be terrific. Okay. So just going through we've gone through this a little bit about, you can choose for your final project to be a case study. Just take a wine you admire or that you wonder about or like to drink and look it up online. See if you can just find their snapshot about the winery and then about their wine. Kind of who are they? What is it that they're trying to promote? And then how to explain the wine that you're making with the Wine Biz Cell. Again, if you're doing a case study is a great sort of intermediate. You're not a newbie and you're not going to open your own winery, so a case study can provide some structure and trying to figure this out. There had also been a question I'd gotten via email. It didn't get posted on the Facebook page, but it also had to do with the difference between an MSRP and what's called the ASP, which is the actual selling price or average selling price, ASP. And the question was, if I have a tasting room, would I do that? And the answer is, unfortunately, probably. Anybody ever buy blinds for their windows? Mm-hmm. And they've got such a huge difference between the MSRP, and if you're not getting a 40% discount off of any major brand, you're frankly not really smart. I didn't want to say stupid, but seriously, everything's 40% off or 60% off or whatever, because that's the game. And when people become conditioned to a certain way of things going on, when they go into the store, you see the MSRP, you see the discounted price, you see then the 6-bottle or case discount price. People become conditioned, like, what's the deal for me? The other thing is that by offering an MSRP, you might sell it for that room and that in the tasting room, but join our wine club now, give us your mailing address, do something and you get a discount off of that. And that would really be your average selling price for the most part, okay? So it's a mental game. It works, and so that's how and why it's done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was my question that I had emailed you.
Yeah. All right, Andrew. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's perfect.
Because I really only, I've been in a wine shop where it's like, clearly like you're discounted from what, the MSRP is, like having wines that are like $9.99 and then for the whole year. And then I don't know if that was the law out here, but they couldn't be discounted 1 month out of the year. So like something like Apothic Red would go up to like $22, but just for like 1 month. And then it would be $9.99 the rest of the year.
Right. Yeah. Isn't that just crazy? For 1 month, it's $22, and everywhere else. And, the biggest differential we found, and people do get caught in this. There's a nationally sold Chardonnay, and their website claims $24.99, and it's everywhere at $8.99. So there are actual federal laws, and then there are state restrictions that you need to understand. Sometimes they're very, very generous. Sometimes they're actually pretty hard, depends on the state. But you really have to watch yourself because some people way overinflate the MSRP, and if I guess if the feds get called about it, they'll actually levy fines and that kind of stuff. All right, so the mission, the vision, and the goals. This is basic business plan stuff. And again, the vision of where you see your wine in the future, 5 years, 10 years down the road, and including that, kind of what are you doing? And so this is the vision is just mentally forecasting where you're going to be, what you're going to be doing, what your product is, that kind of thing. The mission statement is then what you're going to accomplish that's tangible. So mission statement could be, we're going to open our winery, our tasting room, have our wine club set up by this date. So a mission is, in military terms, our mission is to take control of this country and whatever. We see a vision for free people and democracy and this kind of stuff. And then the goals and objectives are very tangible and also have a what we call by when. And it's usually money, it's case productions, those kind of things. So you could put your products that you're going to make in the mission statement, but then you put all your financials and sales objectives and case production and whatever in your goals and objectives. Okay, does that make sense? Now, so I also wanted to talk about my trip to the bourbon country. And I've never gone to the bourbon country. I've gone through it and lived in some areas near or whatever. And what I want to emphasize here is, remember at the very beginning of this course, how are different businesses different and how are they similar, right? And so it was really fun for me looking at bourbon from a business standpoint, because I'm actually being, I was consulting for a bourbon startup. Did anybody know that there are, I think these are just general whiskeys. These aren't specifically bourbon, but it was a whole group of products where they took used barrels from sherry making in Spain, which is kind of interesting because the sherry makers buy used whiskey barrels to age their sherry in. And then once they're used for the sherry, they're sent back, and then the whiskey's aged in these sherry barrels. So there's a Pedro Jimenez, there's a Amontillado, there's a Moscato barrel, and so forth. But these are $449 a bottle.
Wow.
Did you try them? Are they good?
I didn't try them. We were trying lots and lots of different things. But the funny thing is, I mean, how much of an effect could it have for a whiskey? And what I know of distilling, and I've actually run a still in my backyard at Silverado Country Club years ago. But yeah, I was actually doing purification studies of different emergency water systems, but it looked like and smelled like a still. So it was just such a great example of trying to differentiate something where the differences aren't necessarily all that tangible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot could be said for, duking it out in the Napa Valley Cabernet arena, or, the big red wine, or the Oregon Pinot Noir scene, and so forth. We went into a store that bills itself as, I believe they're now the second largest liquor store in the world. And it was just absolutely incredible. And so that's what this picture was about. This is looking down the aisles one way and then looking down the aisles the other way, and all these products. And then everybody's up in arms. So we're in Louisville, Kentucky, right? And we go over to the Jim Beam section. Has anybody seen what Jim Beam's doing with their bourbons?
Mm-mm.
Apple, cinnamon spice, holiday pumpkin spice, along with Starbucks and everybody else, trying to find that edge to somehow, and they've got this huge shelf presence as a result of it. But then they're facing the wrath and the ire of the bourbon purists, who would do that? Then this is an actual distillery that's right next to this big store, and the owner of the store, this is kind of an interesting business proposition. Remember, we've talked about tied house laws and regulations. If you hold licensing in one area, you're restricted in certain things you can do in the other 3 licensing areas of the 3-tier system. So the owner of the store, very successful, made millions, big business. For a while, it was billed as the largest packed liquor and wine store in the world. So he wanted to open a distillery. They found that they had some access to artesian water next door. And so he sold his business to his employees and then took his profits and opened up this distillery. And everything that we've been talking about of diversification and events and private groups and stuff like that are all there. This is the events room, and then with space out here where the column still is right out this door. You know, column stills can be 3 or 4 stories high. They can hold 400 people. And then you can see here that they're down in the tasting room, they're selling ties and all sorts of glassware and this, but they're really promoting the event center, and it's called New Riff Distilling was the name of the place. They've got the chef's table for bourbon, right? They've got Ashley in the tasting room. Look how beautifully it's laid out, and fundamentally the way this runs is as a bar. People come in for tastings, but the vast amount of their revenue is just as a bar. So really fascinating.
Is that the standard? Is that the norm? That most of them are instead of more like tasting, they're actual bars?
Well, in the big distilleries, they'll have both.
Okay.
And so they've got the tours, and you go on the tours, and it's the tour guides, and they take you through the same old stuff. I think we went on like 4 tours, and if you go to Buffalo Trace is one of the big ones, and then we didn't go to Jim Beam, but it was again one of the other ones, and it's just a wine tour, and you're replacing wine geeks with bourbon geeks.
And same with craft beer. It's all the same. They're all.
Yeah, it really is, and the big question is who's doing something different.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody thinks they are, but when it comes down to the bottom line, they're really not.
Yeah, it was. We went to Maker's Mark a couple years ago, and I was like, "Oh, this is just like a wine tour and tasting."
Oh, that's where we were.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and they take the color red, which is the wax seal, right, that they dip.
Yeah.
The shutters are that color.
Yes, it's beautiful. It's especially beautiful at Christmas.
Yeah, and it's just bucolic, the little stream, the little covered bridge that you go over as you go down, and all the stories and this and that.
And it's way, way, way out there. Like, I remember driving out there like, oh my gosh, Where are we?
Yeah.
It was definitely, I think, like a good hour and a half off the highway.
Well, and it's all part of the bourbon wine trail, or the bourbon trail.
Mm-hmm.
So just like they've got, the different programs in virtually every region, here's the bourbon trail, and you stay at the bed and breakfasts or at the country inns, and you go. And the thing that kind of I was really present to was how identical it all is. But now what they're doing is in the bourbon, because to be a bourbon, you've got to be 51% corn, and then you got a certain amount of rye and stuff. The long and short is there's a mash bill, and so sometimes they're a little different, but not all that much. It's got to be aged 4 years in new oak made to specification and so on. And there's a little bit of deviation in how much char. But at the end of the day, and that's for the special bourbons, at the end of the day, it's really very formulaic. And a lot of places are getting their distilled spirits from one of the bigger producers and then trying to add it. So what they were doing at Maker's Mark was they were adding staves of toasted French oak, like for wine, and they would put that inside the barrel with the char to create a story and whatever. Well, here's what was most fascinating to me from a business standpoint. At New Riff, they also had a Kentucky Wild Gin, a couple of versions. They had a vodka. They have moonshine, which is basically the distillate with nothing done to it, which is not much different from the vodka. But these were the cash flow, because to make this Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey is a 4-year in barrel minimum. So you've opened your distillery, you've got your tasting room, you've got the still, you make the bourbon, then it's going to be 4 years till you can sell that. What do you do for the 4 years? Well, vodka, the moonshine, the gins take a little bit longer. So this is all part of when you're looking at the business plan, also sort of intermediate points. And especially when your mission, you might have a mission to build your winery and have it up and running by this year. If you're planting vineyards, that's a whole another set of years to wait for things to get into production and so on. If you're doing high-end reserve red wines, you might age them 2 years in barrel and another year before release. So what else are you doing in those 10 years?
It's like part of your plan is what am I going to do to supplement until the actual product is in my full business plan becomes what it's supposed to be, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And it could be that you're just going to, pay on your debt and so on. But this is again why so many people are just not using the estate model anymore, because money and the value of the money is so important. It just doesn't make business sense.
You can't sit on it for 4 years, you got to do something within those, because you're still putting it out, so you have to have something coming back in.
Right, exactly. What are you going to do over that period of time? Now, back when I was young, back in the 70s, a lot of wineries in California planted their vineyards, built their winery, and then bought fruit up until the point that they could start making estate wines, okay? But what happened time after time, that you're under sort of pressure to start using your own fruit, and that's what you want to do, and you want to use that estate bottling as a differentiation point. But very often the fruit that they were buying might have been superior to what they could grow.
So then what happens when they actually, I mean, how do you balance that?
Well, what would happen is their big announcement and their mission to by X year have, you know, estate wines, and then all of a sudden the ratings they were getting and everything would plummet. And
So then
I was in retail, so as a buyer, I'm tasting these wines, and out comes this new vintage. I'm really excited. It's their estate wine, and I'm going, meh.
So then you would have to make sure that your plan B was if I can't produce what I'm purchasing, then I need to continue to purchase and supplement with what I put out.
But ego makes it really hard to do that.
What was that?
Ego makes it really hard to do that. Yeah.
But that's the smart plan, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it would be. And so always think about also mitigating risk. And, you know, we were at Buffalo Trace Winery, and they were telling us on that tour that by 2020, they will be double the capacity they are today. And they're in the probably close to million case level. They're one of the biggies. And they've got all these sub brands and whatever. It's all done all on the same campus, but in different bonded storage rooms and this and that. And then in 2022, there'll be an additional 50% from where they are now. So they're placing an expansion bet on a trend continuing. And there's dozens and dozens of little startups like the one that I'm working with that has a pretty unique twist on it that I can't really talk about. But it could be that by 2020, that production of bourbon has expanded, maybe doubled in 2 years. And what happens if that market's not there?
Well, isn't that what happened with wine? I mean, it's happened with wine in the past, but it just drives it down, and then they go bankrupt, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's why then the next part, and then also just this part of it, how do you allocate your time and effort, and kind of getting a sense of a lot of the major things that have to be done. And small wineries end up spending so much time on paperwork and permits, and that wasn't part of their vision. Nobody wrote the vision. I want to start a winery, whether it's urban, whether it's estate, whether it's part of a alternate, however it is, custom crush. And my vision is that in 5 years, I'll be spending over half my time on label approvals and compliance paperwork and permits, and nobody does that, right? So as you're doing this exercise, look at all of the things that are fighting for the attention. And in big wineries, of course, you know, you've got each one is a division or a department of the company and whatever. But if you're a smaller guy, you know, you think, oh, I'm going to be hosting the tours and tasting, but you're stuck doing paperwork and compliance. And you really need to get out there and talk to the growers and see how things are going and whose fruit you're going to use and all this. And at the same time, you know, you're trying to support your regional marketing and whatever, and go on these tours with the Napa Valley Vintners Association or Virginia Wine Growers, or et cetera, et cetera. So then the production model, and then how else are you going to make the money? And then this actually gets to the part that we were just discussing. What's going on in the world? And if your mission calls for you to be releasing your wine even in a year, let alone 4 years or 10 years, where's the market going to be? And this is one of the areas where the wine industry really sucks at forecasting and understanding trends. Syrah was a great example of that, that it was showing this really healthy development. People started planting or budding over their vineyards and whatever, and all of a sudden all this Syrah came online, and poof, that market kind of tanked. So then what?
Yeah, I heard a terrible saying. I'm sure you've heard it. It's like this wine buyer supposedly said to to someone when they were trying to sell a case of Syrah, and it's like, I can get rid of pneumonia easier than I can get rid of a case of Syrah.
Yeah.
I've heard it dirtier too, but that's the clean version.
Yeah, and I know the dirty one, and I love it. It's really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, what doesn't fit in this? Gonorrhea, AIDS, and Syrah, and AIDS doesn't fit in, or wait, gonorrhea doesn't fit in because you can get rid of that.
Yep.
Okay, so and there are so many little wineries in every region where they came in with this great idea to make a unique and special wine that isn't. They spent a lot of money because they had it and because they could. They saw what wines are selling for, and maybe were able to work out on the back of a napkin or on an Excel spreadsheet, wow, look at this margin. And the margin can be huge, but then they didn't have a plan to sell it. They didn't have a way to actually do it. And 200 cases of really expensive wine sitting in a bonded warehouse or in storage somewhere, and then you've got more coming online, you know. So if you've got a 3-year period, you're already going to have 3 vintages by the time you release the first one, and be into your 4th vintage. So now you've got 4 years of product, and find out you can't sell the first year. Personification, I'm going to talk about this on Wednesday, and just to kind of stir the pot a little bit, and I'm just going to ask you guys for cliches, okay? Because I'm not going to be nice about the answers about this. But as a cliche, who is a white Zinfandel drinker?
Old ladies or young women?
And are they educated or uneducated?
Uneducated.
Uneducated.
And what's their financial demographics?
Lower.
Yeah. And so what happens is we tend to think in terms, and we've done it, it shows up everywhere. It's just sort of normal. Millennials are this. Gen Xers are that, baby boomers are whatever. And in terms of successful marketing, that is just an absolute, so unbelievable overgeneralization. And it really inhibits the ability to get a sense of really who are your customers going to be? Where do they shop? And if it's just a tasting room, are you looking for the people that are just driving through on the wine trail, just like there are the people that go to the bourbon trail and they're in their RV, or they're doing, you know, these beautiful bucolic bed and breakfasts or whatever? You really need to get a sense so that when you're putting out the material, that you're speaking to people on the terms that is most productive in terms of what your strategy is around your marketing, okay? I'll introduce my research colleague on Wednesday. And she's a PhD in sensory sciences. She's a board certified physician. She's a pediatrician, board certified. She actually went to medical school in Paris and did medical school in French. Speaks 4 languages impeccably. So Italian, Spanish, French, and English. And she's a white Zin drinker. And
So
nobody,
it's stereotyped as at its finest.
exactly, exactly right. And one of the things I really want you to get out of this course is how we take it for granted that it's okay to call consumers stupid, and how poor a job we do at personifying who we're actually trying to target. Okay, and so we'll talk about that in a deep level on Wednesday. All right. You know, we've talked about data and those kind of things, and you guys got the copies of the Nielsen and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, if let's say you're doing the $25 red wine blend, or maybe you're doing a red Zinfandel, or you're doing a $200 Napa Cabernet or something like that, or an Oregon Pinot Noir, whatever it is, what's going on in that product category now? So we've gone from the macro to the micro. Now we're looking at a product category defined by the product. And is that going up or down? Is it becoming saturated? Is it maybe becoming confusing for the consumer? And that's one of the risks red blends have. And the reason is there's really nothing that tells you that Apothic is sweet and this other one is dry and this other one's kind of classic and this other one's totally wacko. What happens is, and this has happened and continues to happen for red Zinfandel, is an identity and communications problem that consumers just don't trust. What the heck am I going to get when I spend my good money and open a bottle? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as you're working on this, and Andrea, are you going to do this for one of your wines?
I'm gonna do it for the tasting room I'm running.
Yeah. Oh, that you're running. Awesome. That'll be great.
I'll
And
do it
so-
for my wine later.
Yeah. And do you guys do any in-state direct-to-account sales?
Not currently.
Okay. And you know what's required to do that?
Yes.
Okay, great. You need to have a wholesaler's license, and then you can sell and deliver and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you will have a wine club, correct?
Yes.
And is everybody clear on the difference of a wine club and a mailing list?
Not totally.
Okay, I'm just thinking I hadn't covered this, so let me make sure I do. Before the internet, there was something called a mailing list. And for highly allocated, hard to get wines, the mailing list was something you were on or you were off. If you're on the mailing list, when the winery released whatever this allocated wine was, you would get 1 bottle or 1 case or whatever the agreement was for people on the mailing list. They send you out a letter, and now it would be an email to everybody that's on the list. And today, a mailing list is just simply an electronic list. It's pretty much an emailing list. If you're on the list, you'll get a notification that the wine is getting ready to be released. You'll have X number of days to respond if you don't want the wine. And then they will do the mailing and charge all the credit cards. Okay? So if you say, well, I don't, and there's a number of requirements for this to work, and it is the holy grail of wine sales. So let's say that I'm producing 2,000 cases of this special reserve, whatever it is, Pinot, Cabernet, Reserve White, Zinfandel. And when the wine's bottled, I'm satisfied that it's settled enough. We take it out of bond, we transfer it, we notify everybody on the mailing list your shipment is coming. We sell it all in one day and charge all the credit cards, and we're done. We maybe reserve some for the tasting room or events or for our own library wines and whatever, but it's basically a done deal. And there's whatever the price is whatever the price is. And this is how Kosta Browne launched into the stratosphere with their Pinot Noir, because their Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir was being 90% of it was sold on mailing list, and it was full price, the full price being $52.99, and the nearest competitor for the category average was $26 a bottle. Their margin was huge. They created this aura around it. They were the production cost was not much more than the large category leader, but they were getting double the price. So they were probably getting easily $240 a case or so more gross margin than anybody in that category. And so they received an offer from some of the smartest people in this business for a $40 million influx of capital. Okay. So the mailing list, for it to work, you have to have not only the mailing list, but people on a waiting list, because you have to have a sense of fear. If I don't take my order, I get kicked off the list and somebody else comes on. So part of a mailing list is also contingent on you're on the list and you take the order, and if you decide not to, you're off the list and somebody takes your spot. You don't get the wine anymore.
Seems like you would choose one or the other for your business model, right? Like wine club or mailing list? No, there's both?
Yes. And so what you do is you create a very special wine and you build it up very slowly so that maybe there's 10 people on the list, but you can't get any of this unless you're on the list.
So they would already be in the wine club and they would be like, oh, but I want to be on the mailing list too.
Yes, it would say, this, and so you give it a special name, a special designation, and so forth, because you allow a certain amount to the wine club members, or give them a certain priority to be on the mailing list, or make it part of an additional selection from the wine club. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you see it, you know what? I haven't even thought about Googling. Let me Google. Oh, here we go. Oh, where was this when I was 20? So select wineries that no longer accept names for wine allocations, but you can sign up for the waiting list. And here you go. Here's an article about it. And all I did was winery mailing list is what I Googled. And so here's a winerymailinglists.com. Woohoo! So this is something to look into for anybody who's interested in that. Yay. Cool. All right, competitive analysis. 5 competitive wines, similar price, and whatever. And in the business, then you actually go back and look at all of these things of the competitors. What are they doing? What are their sales channels? What's the look and feel? Who are they targeting? What can you learn from that? What are those wineries doing? How are they making money? And so forth. What kind of winery model are they? So when you're doing a competitive analysis, people think you're just looking at price. But you really, really want to focus on what are the most successful wines in the category that you're going into, and what's their formula that's making them successful. Sometimes you might actually be looking at another model that's not even maybe the same exact wine that you're making, but you're just looking to see what people are doing that's successful that's out there, okay? So this could be a red blend, it could be the Pinot Noir, the Moscato, the whatever, but also if you're doing something a little bit different, if you're doing a Viognier, you might be looking at several Viogniers, but you also want to see who's rocking it with Chardonnay and why, or who's doing certain things with white blends and why, and those kind of things, okay? One of the big challenges for Oregon is what to do with Pinot Gris, right, Andrea?
Yeah.
And frankly, Pinot Grigio is a huge category, which it all can be legally called. Pinot Gris is a smaller category. And so, you know, which direction do you go, or do you make both? Maybe even from the same blend, but maybe then the Pinot Gris you might oak age or malolactic, and you're going to, you know, split the cuvee up into two different batches. Now you might be able to get business and a higher price for the Pinot Gris and have better cash flow, a lighter, more delicate style wine for the Pinot Grigio. That's another thing people do. All right, now for you, Andrea, why your products and services are competitive, different. This is going to be why is your tasting experience different from your neighbors, and what are you going to do to market it? Because your job is you're not going to sell anybody who doesn't come to your tasting room or join your wine club. All right. So you've really got to focus in then on creating that first step, which is how do you get people there in the first place or to your website, and what are you offering that's different? I mean, I could have made a recording of my first bourbon tour and just played it to lip sync for everybody afterwards.
Yeah.
You know? And New Riff, the new distillery that I was showing you the gin and stuff from, one of their big things is we didn't hire a master distiller. Our key position is a master brewer, because all the flavors that's going to go into our distillate and make our bourbon different is actually created in the mash, and basically the process is very similar to how beer is made. Yep. So that was BS, but it's kind of fun.
I'm just hoping the Yellow Labrador will be able to sell all the wine.
Yeah. And if you do a search, you've seen the book Winery Dogs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. You know, it's the dog, it's the story, it's the ghost, it's the whatever.
Yeah.
All right. So sales strategies, again, MSRP and how and why you're doing that and how you're going to achieve it. Because one of the other things is, and again, whether it's your own tasting room, every now and then you're going to have excess inventories and whatever, so you can just put something on sale. If you're doing a larger plan with actual 3-tier, you know, people achieve certain pricing with the post-offs that we've talked about, the discounting programs, and in a lot of stores, the couponing. So, buy this bottle of wine, get a coupon for $1 off in the seafood department. Or cut out this coupon, bring it in, and you'll get an extra $1 or $3 off your bottle of wine. That you've got to be really, really careful about, because each state has its own prohibitions or regulations or not about how all that runs. All right. And then, Andrea, this will be a big one for you. It's your promotional outline for your tasting room and your website. So, and then going back to the personification and making a lot of personas, because you want to hit the people that are just driving through the area on their way to somewhere else, and might be just, where are we going to go? We're just going to stop on our way from Portland to this or whatever. It might be people who are, another persona would be the people who are specifically doing the wine tours of the area and all that kind of stuff. All right, and so forth. And then we get down into the strategies for each of the different areas: consumer direct, your wine club, tasting room, and mailing list, online, e-tailer, Groupon. And this actually bears a little bit of discussion. So discounting and whatever, and it's always been a challenge. We've got X amount of cases of a certain vintage that maybe was substandard, or the market changed and we've got all this Syrah left over. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to unload it? Because if you do have the possibility of lowering the price significantly, you run the risk of people expecting that to become the price. So sometimes when you lower a price, it's really hard to get it back up. And that's why down here, airlines, cruise ships, and military clubs, there's actually brokers who deal with the kind of distressed goods, if you will. And in airlines, you can get your wine in business class. American used to pay no more than $42 a case, but you would take that hit. It would get it in front of people that are a really solid demographic because they're in business class, and then people wouldn't see that you've lowered the price.
Kind of like grocery outlet's good for that.
Grocery outlet is really dangerous for that, because people can see you've lowered the price, and they say, wow, I've been buying this for this.
But doesn't it mostly, the products that go through a grocery outlet type business is like seasonal products, like like a seasonal beer or a seasonal cheese or something along those lines?
Go into the wine section and talk to somebody there.
Okay.
Because each store has their own buyer for the wine department and beverages. And we've got one here, and my wife is part of a music school nonprofit. And every year, and the owner, their kids, the local owner of the grocery outlet franchise, their kids go to the school. And I found a Napa Valley prestigious white wine blend, and it was verified on their website, $42.99 a bottle, and a silk screen, absolutely gorgeous, $7.99 a bottle.
Well, and that was because they had too much, or, I mean, who sold it to them? Doesn't it typically come straight from the supplier to them?
Don't know.
Interesting.
And if it's coming from the distributor to them, then they're in trouble with that distributor, because the distributor's they are not going to lose that kind of money.
No, I mean, the only time I thought that would happen is, like I said, like a seasonal product.
Yeah, no, go to the wine section, and they've actually got brands that are made kind of for that area.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you'll see a Napa Valley name, but and some fairly small wineries, And then you'll see a California, not a Napa Valley AVA. So it's probably bulk wine or leftover goods or something that they just might do for their own cash flow. And so one that was there regularly is Luna Vineyards from the Napa Valley, which is Mike Moon, who was the president while I was with Behringer for most of that period. And he started Luna Vineyard over by Silverado Country Club and whatever. And they've got a Luna Pinot Grigio and I believe a Cabernet Sauvignon, and it's day in, day out, $7.99 in the grocery outlet. Yeah, and a lot of French wines, and so anyways, it's fascinating to go in. So go in, Tina, and think it differently. Okay. Did we bring clarity to the final projects?
I think so.
All right. So I was just sort of noodling how to do this in an hour. Here's what we're going to do for Wednesday. Be glad to take any questions and whatever, but basically for the next 2 weeks, everybody's going to be working on your final projects. Set up any calls with me, anything that's not complete or so on. And I'll throw in some conversations about export markets, my recent trip to China, and kind of what's going on in the world. If there's a section in here that you would like me to spend more time, just send me an email, say, hey, Tim, cover this, or can you talk about whatever? And it could be import, what does it take to be an importer? How does that work? It's up to the will of the class for the next couple of weeks. And then what I'm going to do Wednesday is I'm going to talk about the market from my area of passion and ongoing research, and that's the genetics and the neurology of preference forming of wine and many things beyond it that most people don't know about, have no clue about, but it's a whole different way to think about the market, okay? So Wednesday we'll do rethinking the market, and then Monday I'll give you guys some ideas of some stuff to have on hand if a week from tonight you want to have a glass of wine and some food bites. And also this Friday, I'll send out a note to this. I'm doing something with a social media expert who's actually driving over from Eugene over to my house. And we're going to be live streaming demonstrations of the reality of what happens when you have a beautifully prepared piece of poached fish in Riesling with a little lemon and salt, and serve it with a big ass red wine. And your brain goes, oh, it'll overpower, that doesn't happen. You've just been told that, and that's what you think. And it doesn't happen. And you've been told the fat in a steak or in butter, and it smooths out a wine and makes it less bitter and tannic. The opposite, it makes it more bitter and tannic. That doesn't even happen. So anyways, hopefully for the next couple weeks, you will enjoy a provocative look at the market and at wine and food pairing, and answering any questions pertinent to the final projects or this class. Always have priority over that, so just let me know what you need, okay? What else?
That's it.
Yeah.
Off we go. Boy, it's a beautiful day here in Bend, and hope it is where you guys are. And thanks so much for being on the call, and we will get this turned around and see you shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, you guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.